So this is going to be an advanced tips and tricks video for players that know how to play Tin Can, but just wants to get a little bit more survival time out of their either normal or hardcore run. So if that's what you're looking for, that's basically what we're going to be talking about. And I am going to assume that you have the basics down. So you understand that you should, for example, immediately swap out these bottles when you start the game. Also that you have some idea of which systems are not critical to have on all the time, that you can switch off, that you can remove batteries from. So we are going to start by doing all of that like we ordinarily would. And I'm also going to assume that you have dealt with most of the events. So if you do need to see my original tips and tricks video, I will link that in the description below, where we talk about all of the normal stuff that you need to do, including what I've just done. But we'll start here with one of the most useful things, which is that you can, and in some cases should, manually vent oxygen into the pod in cases where that's necessary. So in my original video, I spoke about the fact that you have these three critical systems: the carbon dioxide scrubber, the oxygen generator, and of course, the temperature management system as well. But in reality, you can actually, and I did a video where I completely dismantled the oxygen generator, and you can still survive for a long time without that. That's not to say that it's easy to do it, and if you're starting out in the game, I wouldn't recommend doing that. And of course, I also wouldn't recommend doing it just for the heck of it. It's just if you get into those situations where you have to start sacrificing systems, it is possible to sacrifice this system as well. Now, the way you do that, so let's just switch this off and assume for whatever reason we can't use this anymore. It could be because we're trying to keep the carbon dioxide scrubber online, and we're trying to keep the CO2 to O2 system online, which, even though you can switch this off from time to time, you are still going to need it for longer term survival. What you can do is to just position this somewhere in the pod, and we'll have a quick look at. So the oxygen is at about 20% right now, and we're just going to manually vent some of this in here. You can see the breathability is going down because the system isn't switched on. But what you want to keep your eye on here is the pressure. So if I do vent some of this manually into the pod, it's going to go around like this, and this is why you have to be careful with this. But we have just done that, and you'll see that it's now up to 30%. So even though we don't have the system, we can manually keep on releasing oxygen as long as the pressure doesn't become a problem. Of course, there is such a thing as having too much O2 in the air, and that can also be fatal. It's highly unlikely that that's going to kill you, though. And if you're using the standard pressure within the pod, the pressure will kill you, or at least you'll have a critical failure, which will be fatal with pressure long before the O2 becomes an issue. So related to this point, just be aware that if you are manually venting oxygen like I just did, it is much easier to do that if you have the gravity generator functional. If that's switched off, and again, if you look at my video where I've actually done that on purpose, it can be really difficult to kind of catch the O2 bottle again and disable it. So just be aware of that, and that can very easily land you in a situation where you just keep endlessly venting O2 into the atmosphere, which will eventually cause a failure, most likely because of the pressure. So just be aware of that. If you do get into that situation, of course you can unlock the airlock, and you can open up this door to release some of the pressure. Something that's important to know there is, and let's just release a little bit more oxygen again. I'm going to try to position this in a way so that it doesn't completely fly away, but that can be difficult to do. Okay, so we've just released a little bit more. Let's see where we are in the pressure. So it's still not in the red zone, and we have plenty of oxygen. If you just open this up, you will see that the pressure will slowly start dropping as that door is no longer sealed. This is a really good way to get the pressure to exactly the right level that you want to get it to. Of course, if it's an emergency, you can also pull on the door to release gas from this faster. But this is a really nice and controlled way if I want to get the pressure level to exactly where I want to get it. And this is, of course, assuming that you have disabled the pressure generator, which in a lot of cases I would be disabling that because, as I said, you can basically release pressure, or you can manage pressure in this way. Just be aware that whatever atmosphere we just released from the pod, you can never get that back. There's a sort of perfect little system within the pod where you can manage between the systems, and of course you can convert your CO2 into O2 and release that into the atmosphere again. But as soon as atmosphere has left the system, there's no getting it back. You basically have what's in the pod and what's inside the bottles. But that is a really useful way, and we'll keep this system switched off for the rest of the video so that you can see it's perfectly manageable for us to keep increasing or at least surviving within the pod. Again, we've just emptied that bottle completely, so we'll just switch these out again. Now, be aware that you can do this with any one of the bottles, so you could do it with the CO2, I'm reasonably certain. Let's just double check that. Yes, you can release the content. Right now, in the current version of the game, I can't think of any good reason to do that. You also have the nitrogen bottle, so if you just want to increase the pressure in general, there are certain circumstances where you may want to do that. You can just take this out and manually vent nitrogen into the air as well. And if that, for whatever reason, ran out, and there's not a lot of situations where that would happen, you also have a liquid nitrogen bottle. The rate at which this increases pressure in the pod is incredibly fast if you're releasing that, and a couple of seconds mistake there in terms of not being able to catch the bottle could be fatal. So just be aware of that. So that's the biggest one in terms of being able to survive even when this system is not functional. A couple of other things that you can keep in mind. So one thing is that this main computer, I have spoken about the fact that you don't need all the parts in here and all of that in my original tips and tricks video. But one thing that you don't realize when you start playing the game is that this takes a lot of power. So any situation where power is an issue, you want this system to be switched off, especially if you're going to be charging batteries. It's a good idea to have this switched off. It takes a lot of power relative to the function that it gives you in the ship. And I do have a whole video about how to manage power and batteries as well. I'll also link that in the description because, of course, as I always say, that you really want to try and not waste batteries. And you can charge them, but you need to be careful about how you do that to not cause any power surges. So, and then the final thing for today's video is just to be aware that in terms of fixing systems, the repair box, as always, should be a last resort. You do lose out some parts when you take things through the repair box, and between all of these systems that you can potentially get rid of, so the pressure generator, you can get rid of the light system, and there's a couple of other systems which can become redundant as well as you play throughout the game. It's really easy to get all of the normal parts, but the big stuff, or the most dangerous system that can break, is actually the main generator. And it particularly gets problematic if it comes towards things such as the large power connector up here, the high capacity fuse, which could be an issue, and the large power transformer. The reason this is problematic is there's only one other system where you can find these exact parts, and that's within the gravity generator. And in cases where it does fail, I would recommend getting it from the gravity generator. But just be aware that this is really where you may want to use the repair system for some of these parts, and also be aware of exactly what each of these parts do. So, for example, if the processor fails in this, the temperature will keep going up, and that's going to start becoming a big problem very fast. Of course, you can reduce that by switching the system off, but in that case, you won't have any power. And there's really not a lot of situations where not having power is not going to quickly decrease the amount of time that you can survive within this game. Again, also, you don't want a failed fuse on this, because if you have any other issues with your power, that is very quickly going to become a big problem with this system. And the large power transformer, well, this is one where you basically, you don't need that to be in tip-top condition always. You can still use it if it's damaged, but of course, if it's properly damaged, that's going to be a serious issue, and the same thing is true for the large power connector. So this is really, these are the systems where you want to keep your eye on it and potentially make use of the repair box. The rest of the systems, you should really only start doing that towards the end game, where you know exactly which parts you're going to run out of, things such as the pumps, and you don't want to waste parts by using the repair box for no reason. And the final thing then that I want to talk about in terms of things that you need to be careful of. So, of course, the biggest tip I can give you is just to get some practice, get used to all the different systems, and just get used to making decisions under the frantic pressure that you get in a lot of cases in this game. Let's just have a look at how these systems are doing. I think the CO2 is rising, so we just need to sort this out real quick. One of the easiest ways to die is to accidentally touch an electronic component while something is switched on, and particularly with these systems, the main generator and the gravity generator, because those will pretty much be fatal. I don't think you can tap the button fast enough to get out of that situation. And so two things you want to remember here. The one is just always make sure that you have these systems switched on before you switched off before you touch anything, and that should be the case for any system. But more importantly, keep an eye on if these buttons actually work. Because when things are frantic and you're quickly running around, you're trying to switch the system off and then grabbing stuff, you might be hitting that button and the system doesn't go off. And this could happen in a lot of different systems at any point in the game. And multiple times this has happened to me where at some point that little button got damaged, you hit it, the system doesn't switch off, you immediately reach out for an electronic component, and that ends your run early. So those are some of the advanced tips. I will be sharing more of these as I'm doing more hardcore runs on my side as well. But also let me know on your side if you have any other tips, things that have allowed you to survive for longer in the game. And as always, if you do like this type of content, do please like and subscribe. I'll see you for the next video.